Hi, it's 3 o'clock. It's time to go live. Today I'm going to talk about why this. Why am I so passionate about helping people in helping professions, particularly 911 and also other helping professions, with developing their best life? Why would this matter to me? And why do I work so hard to promote it? That's what I want to talk about. So let's see. Well, it says I'm live, but I don't see it. Okay. So I think that one of the things we need to take a look at is our workplace culture. When I was in 911, it's an interesting workplace, and there are other workplaces that are similar. I'll talk about that a little too. When I was in 911, I worked with people very closely, and we utterly had to rely on each other completely for our competence and our well being. You couldn't take a break unless they were willing to cover you. You couldn't um, get it done without other people's cooperation. And when people turn out to be human and disappoint, then it's easy to get angry. And when somebody's new, it's really, really easy to say when they make a mistake that it's a character flaw instead of a mistake, and start to build up an idea that they're just not good enough. And so it makes it very hard to come in. And so what is happening in 911 and other places is that these workplace cultures get toxic. And when new people come in, they won't stay, or older people leave. And it's just when you're short staffed and people are working harder and working longer hours, and it's just really difficult. There's a lot of backbiting and gossip and ugly behaviors that happen in close knit work groups. Why? I just don't think that it's the people that's the problem. So, Sherry Johnson, in her PhD work, surveyed a bunch of 911 pros, and about 80%, 86% of them said that they actually liked their coworkers, which is a pretty good high percentage, isn't it? But interestingly enough, 71% also agreed that they had to work harder because of their incompetence of their coworkers. And so while they liked the people, they viewed them as incompetent. And is that true? Were they really incompetent? That we didn't discover in this PhD work. So that's interesting, isn't it? It's easy to see that in work groups you develop infighting and gossip and rudeness and quality assurance problems. And a lot of people report sick leave abuse. And 911 is not the only industry that suffers that. I also worked at a children's home where we worked with adolescents who had mental health and behavioral health issues. And there was a high turnover in the people who worked directly with the adolescents. And it's the same sort of high pressure kind of work as 911, where there's times where it's easy, it's not a big deal, but it can turn into a really big deal in a moment. And so there's a lot of stress in anticipating that it's going to be a big deal, or it could be a big deal. And people get really good at identifying with the adolescents whether or not tensions are rising. But even still, sometimes a kid would get triggered and it's all of a sudden emergency. And in 911, the next phone call could just change your whole day. I've experienced that many, many times where the day was quiet until all of a sudden it wasn't. And so the nature of the work leads to stress, but your people are not the problem. The people that you work with are just like anybody else. They have their strengths and weaknesses, and they have their good side, and we all have a bad side. We all have things where we could improve. I don't think the people are the problem. I do think that we have this invisible dragon that is breathing out fire on us and creates compassion fatigue or PTSD. And I think that a lot of it is because we're not self-aware. Compassion fatigue, PTSD, burnout, excessive stress, vicarious trauma, secondary traumatic stress. All these are names for stress-related challenges that we face in emergency work and in work closely related to people. Some of the other professions that struggle are nurses and doctors and anyone who works in the medical profession, but also people who work in nursing homes, people who are counselors, teachers. There's so many professions where you're working directly with people, and these struggles are part of the picture. Why? In order to do this work, in order to work with people, we have to be very, very well centered. So let me tell you a little story. Years ago, I worked for a construction company, and we put rebars in bridges. I can't pick up a rebar, but I was the office manager, but our guys went out, and it was mostly guys because rebar is really, really heavy. Although we did have at least one woman iron worker. And they would go out and they built bridges. Now, when you're building a bridge, you have safety equipment. You've got your hard hat, and you've got a harness, and you've got a clip that clips you to a safety thing from your harness. Well, we had one young gentleman who had incredible balance and was absolutely fearless. I think he was about 30 years old. And he was a great guy. They were out in the field. I didn't get to interact with them very much, but he was funny and he was charming when he did stop by the office to come and get a new load of rebar. And his name was Bobby. And I'm speaking in the past tense because Bobby had this thing where he didn't like to clip off. He didn't like to hook onto a safety net. It just sort of cramped his style. But he had incredible balance and he could do a lot. And he was working on a high bridge one day and he didn't clip off. He was always getting in trouble with his foreman, but he was a good worker. And so they didn't fire him, and he didn't clip off, and he fell off that bridge and he died. It was a sad loss. And think of the people that it affected. He had family. I believe he had a couple of small children. He had a company that he was working for. It made us short on that particular job, and we were facing a deadline, which is probably one of the reasons that he was being so careless. How dare he not take the safety precautions he needed to take? How dare he? And how dare we, when we're in high stress occupations, not take the safety precautions we need to take? So taking care of ourselves is what we need to do. I believe that there's 3 pillars to self-care. One is we need to have healthy habits, and I can help you with learning healthy habits. We need to increase our compassion satisfaction. And that is focusing on what's good about the work we do. And also releasing the crushing guilt when we do make a mistake. We want to do it perfectly. We want to do the best we can, but we are human. And sometimes when we make a mistake, we magnify it and make ourselves responsible for an awful outcome. And we need to stop doing that. And we need to start making sure that we really appreciate how good it feels to help somebody. And then we need to increase our self-awareness. And I have a program that helps people learn more about self-awareness. So this is what we can do. Now, I have a guide called the 911 Self-Care Blueprint, and the QR code is up. If you want to get a hold of that, you can sign up for it, and then you'll be on my email list, and I can pour into you. And so that's what I have for you today. And my equipment says that I'm live. I can't tell whether I am or not, and I haven't gotten any comments, so I'm going to go.